Okay, boys and girls, we're going to just do a quick review of the division of whole numbers and unit fractions. Most of you got that last week, where if it says 5 divided by 1/4, we picture that as 5 pizzas. And we're cutting them into 1/4 sized pieces. And then the answer to the question would be, how many 1/4 pieces are there? And the answer would be 20. So when we start with a whole number and we're cutting them into little tiny pieces, we know that our quotient or our answer is going to be greater, which is not the same as if we start with 1/4 of a pizza. My pizzas are going to be square this time. 1/4 of a pizza, and we have to split it with 5 friends. I no longer am going to have 1 out of the 4 pieces, but instead I would have 1 out of 20 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so now this piece represents 1 out of 20. So if I start with a fraction and divide it by a whole number, it's going to be an even smaller fraction. So that's what we did last week. In 5th grade, we only have to divide by unit fractions, but later on, you'll be dividing by, let's say, 3/4. And so it won't be as easy to figure this out. But they have an algorithm to figure it out. And it has a lot of vocabulary words that I don't want you to be worried about. What we have to think about is the inverse operation for division. Now, inverse means opposite. And what is the opposite operation for division? And hopefully you all know that's multiplication. And so to solve division problems, we can often use multiplication. And that's what they do for the algorithm with the division of fractions. So let's look at that again. We know our answer is going to be 20. How do we actually get that following the algorithm? So the first step is to leave the dividend or the first number the same. So the dividend always remains the same. So that's going to be 5. And then rather than division, we're going to use the inverse operation of multiplication. And since we're doing the inverse of that, we're going to do the inverse of the divisor. And so rather than it be 1/4, it's going to be 4/1. Now we can multiply fractions the way we always do. We multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and simplify. So if I multiply the numerator here, I get 20/1, which we know is equal to 20. So that's how it works. We do the inverse operation, and then we do the inverse of the fraction. But that's not called, that mathematical term isn't called the inverse or flipping the fraction. It has a very big name called reciprocal. Okay, so the reciprocal is when we flip the fraction over. So let's look at 1/4 divided by 5. Actually, that's spelled like that. All right, so 1/4 divided by 5. So again, we keep the dividend the same, 1/4. We do the inverse of division, which is multiplication. And then we do the inverse of 5, which we know as a fraction, 5 can be written as 5/1. So we're looking at the inverse or the reciprocal. And that would be 1/5. And so now when we do the multiplication, 1 times 1 equals 1, 4 times 5 equals 20, and that's how we get 1/20. So that's what we're practicing. We're practicing writing these equations using multiplication of the reciprocal. So let's look at another one. Let's look at 8 divided by 1/6. Okay, if we want to multiply by the reciprocal, we keep the dividend the same as 8. We change this to multiplication. And since we're changing this, we're going to flip this fraction to be 6 or 6/1. You can write that either way. And so we know that our answer is then 48. We can fill it in there. Let's look if we start with a fraction. If our fraction is 1/10 and we divide that by 3, we know that we keep the dividend or the first number the same, 1/10. We switch the division to multiplication, and then we do the reciprocal of 3. Since I know that I can write 3 as a fraction, 3/1, I will switch that to 1/3. And then I'll multiply normally. 1 times 1 is 1. 10 times 3 is 30. And so my answer is, for this one, 1/30. So all we're really doing is flipping the operation and flipping the divisor or the second number in each of the division problems. We multiply normally, simplify if we have to. So between this short video and the reference sheet, I'm hoping that you will see how you can find the answers to division problems with fractions using the algorithm of changing it to multiplying by the reciprocal. Good luck, boys and girls.